when people read my entire biography. So thank you. It's so amazing to be here. It is so amazing to be here. It is so amazing to be with you in person, to see your faces and to hear your voices and to feel the energy flow over. This is a real gift to me. I have been with a handful of congregations over the summer. It was all outdoors, and that there's all kinds of beauty to that. There's something about being, the walls, they hold us, they allow the energy to flow in a different way. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity, and especially I want to thank the folks who really pulled this together, Carol Bayer-Mott and Bill Halpern and John Reel. Thank you so much, and to Rabbis Fred Dobb and Rachel Hirsch and Josh and Daria. It's so amazing to be with you. And to be in this building. I have been here many times for the regional gathering, for the Chesapeake region gathering. This is the first time I have ever been here at night. So it was so wonderful to drive up and say, there it is, that's it. Oh, that's what I'm going to. So just to be with you in this beautiful space and to be with folks online as well. And what a wonderful invitation to talk about racial justice commitments across the Reconstructionist movement. I'm going to actually take off my watch so I can track time, because there's a lot to say, and I don't want to go on too long. And really, I think I could stand up here for 20 minutes and just say, and we're doing this, and we're doing that, and we're doing this, and we're doing that. And that would be really exciting and energizing and probably a little boring. So what I want to do is try to tell you a little bit of this, so much as story, but what I really want to do is not just list the what, and I'll do some of that along the way, not all of it, because there is a lot, but I also want to give you a sense of how this came to be and why this emerged, and most importantly, I think, who is driving all of this, because this is a project, this is a commitment. This is an orientation that is continually evolving. It has changed over the years, and we presume it will continue to change. And there are choices along the way, always, and tensions, and I want to illuminate some of that. But more than anything, what I want to put across to you is the critical role of lay people in centering this commitment and in bringing it to life. And I hope that you will all feel empowered and inspired to continue to contribute to this work. The place I want to start is about 15 years ago, to say that the earliest, and I think in some ways the bravest work on really kind of starting to look at what racial equity might look like within Reconstructionist communities and what working for racial justice more widely might be, was started by a handful of congregations who really started to do this work very, very seriously in coalition work in the community and also internally within their own congregations. So I'm starting here because I really want to point that this was about a lay rabbinic partnership on a local level. And I'll raise up a couple. I mean, I think there are more, but I want to raise up, for example, I want to sing the praises of Adat Shalom. I know this was a long-standing priority at Adat Shalom, and we have really benefited from some of your early work. In Philadelphia, called Tzedek, which was founded in West Philadelphia, which was a majority black neighborhood, and that really felt that as a synagogue was being established there, that taking this work on was really, really important. And I'll point also to Congregation Beit Chaverim in Atlanta, Georgia. A couple things about CBH is, one is that they were founded as a gay and lesbian synagogue. They've long been majority straight, but one part of it is that they had a real sensibility about what it meant to bring the aspirations and the voices of people who were on the margins to the center. And as they really regularized that for openly queer people, they understood that that was the beginning of something, not the end of something. And so they extended this work to doing racial equity work. And that part of that is also because they're located in Atlanta, which is, this is such a deep preoccupation, and there's such a vibrant and successful, I mean, there's a lot of complications in Atlanta, but there's very, very significant black population there. So these congregations and others modeled for, I think, the entire Reconstructionist movement how to do this work and what was possible. They each pursued different paths. There were, what can I do? Sure, that'll make it better. Oh, sure. So happy to do that. I'm also, okay, I'm gonna actually, since I paused, I'm gonna run and get my water and my phone so I can track time. Do you like this? No, this is fine. Okay, thanks so much. And I really know I can go long, and the watch doesn't seem to be. Come on. Thank you. Okay. So, as I said, at the local level, what began to, folks working at the local level began to demonstrate what this kind of work could look like, how to do well, how to make mistakes and learn how to recover. And this really helped to shape the priorities of Reconstructing Judaism, which is the central organization of the Reconstructionist movement. This happened in a couple of different ways. One is that it really helped to inform the priorities at our convention in 2018, the first Reconstructionist movement convention in 8 years. We had a lot of programming. We had a lot of programming on racial justice, and those programs were oversubscribed. We had about 730 people who came to convention. We shut it. We had more who wanted to come, and the hotel said, no, you're exceeding the fire code. You have to shut it down. And of those people, overwhelming numbers of them wanted to come to the programs on racial justice. Some of them were panels, some of them were how-to. There was a day-long program on the intersections between racism and anti-Semitism. And what we learned from surveys and what we learned from conversations with people who came was that people said, we want to do this work and we don't really know how to do it well. We don't feel confident in how to do it. We want your help. So the people who were presenting were from those congregations that had started that work, and the people who were attending were soaking it up and saying, help us with more. So that is how things moved from local congregational levels up to a national and a North American level. And another trajectory I want to trace is that from congregations came some of our first students of color, including Congregation Beit Chaverim in Atlanta, Georgia. That is where now Rabbi Sandra Lawson emerged. That was her home community. When she came to RRC, to the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, Sandra was our first student of color who was not Sephardi or Mizrahi. This was new, and this was big, and we understood, sometimes well and sometimes imperfectly, that this meant that we must change. That part of doing this work is not just opening the doors and saying, come on in, or even recruiting people to come in, but that when we bring, this was true, we learned this when openly gay students enrolled at RRC as well, that this is about transformation, that taking this step and making this commitment is about approaching it with a sense of curiosity and openness to transformation. And it's not always just it's easy. We began to do trainings for our faculty and for our students and for our staff, some of it working on whiteness, some of it working on dismantling racism. We also started to provide special supports for our students of color. So this is, and this has been incredibly fruitful, at times uncomfortable, and we hope at all times we try to keep at the forefront that this is ultimately redemptive, that this is about the world that we want to be living in. So more recently, we're finding more and more congregations are engaging in this work, and one of our roles at Reconstructing Judaism is to bring communities into conversation with each other. The same way that this Shabbaton emerged with Oseh Shalom and Adat Shalom partnering. And one of the great advantages of technology is that it is ever easier to do that. You here in the Chesapeake region, it's relatively easy, traffic notwithstanding, to get together face to face, pandemic permitting. But when the CBH is the only congregation in Atlanta, and there's not another one for another 500 miles. It's a lot, maybe 400 miles. It's a lot harder for them. And yet with Zoom, with technology, we can bring congregations, full congregations together, or we can bring individuals from congregations together in a collective group. So again, to mention Adat Shalom, we drew on the reading group, this incredible reading list and these practices that Adat Shalom had been doing, and we offered that to the entire Reconstructionist community. This year, we've just wrapped up a year of racial learning. Racial justice learning was the name of the learning network, with overwhelming participation, that people stayed the entire year. And we're getting ready. Our congregation in Amherst, the Jewish community of Amherst, which is the largest Reconstructionist congregation in New England, the city of Amherst, might be a town, it's not so big, adopted a policy of reparations, and the congregation in Amherst also began to study reparations, and they created this amazing study guide, and we're about to share that really wonderful tool that they created out across the Reconstructionist movement. So both to bring people together and to amplify the work that you and other congregations are doing. And part of this work, I think part of one of the structures of racism is that it promotes isolation and it promotes separation. And so the network weaving and the collaboration that is pretty inherent to Reconstructionism, and that is a responsibility that we at Reconstructing Judaism take very, very seriously, is also a very good strategy as part of this project of working to dismantle systemic racism. So in addition to paying attention and drawing up and bringing together, this has prompted a lot of leadership reflections across the organization. Some of this has come internally from within the Reconstructionist movement, and some of this, I'm going to go to Daria's right, I'm going to use this one. Some of this also has to do with some of the organizations in which we are active. One of the things that emerges out of your congregations being part of a larger movement is that we represent you in rooms and at tables where no one individual or no one congregation can go. So sometimes that's, last week I was in DC because I got to represent the Reconstructionist movement at the White House Hanukkah party. It was extraordinary. It was very, very moving. It's not always that fun. That was really lovely. There is an organization in which we are very active called the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable. It's a very energized and impactful organization. It's a coalition organization. Now it has about 70 member organizations. Some of them are fully devoted to social justice work, and some, like Reconstructionist Judaism, are partly focused on social justice. And back in 2016, when there were about 30 member organizations, the leadership of the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable made a commitment to center racial justice in our organizations with an intention of transforming the field of Jewish social justice, and with an aspiration through that transformation to influence the rest of the Jewish community. So that meant, when we signed on to that commitment, that Reconstructing Judaism as an organization was going to build on those actions and those aspirations that we were already tracking from within our membership, and we were going to really try to institutionalize that across the organization. So that has meant things like more trainings for our staff and for our board. The Board of Governors and Carol and Bill and John are all members. That's the group that has the highest level, both about making certain that we are achieving our mission and following our North Star, and that is also the group that holds fiduciary responsibility for the organization. But one of the first things that we started to do that was really important, and we've been working on this since the merger about 10 years ago, is to build intermediate structures that are kind of sitting in between the congregations and the board. And then when I'm going high and low, it's just I'm trying to do a chart, not to, rank or anything. So there are two structures, one of which was around for a little while, and one of which was new. We have two commissions in the Reconstructionist movement, the Tikkun Olam Commission and the Joint Israel Commission. And the thing about commissions are that they are joint between Reconstructing Judaism and the Reconstructionist Rabbinical Association. So there are rabbinic representatives that are elected or appointed by the RRA, and then there's a student and there's a faculty member representing RRC, and then from among congregations, individuals nominate themselves and then are elected by the Reconstructionist plenum. And our Tikkun Olam Commission tends to focus only on one issue at a time so that they can really make an impact. And in 2018, early 19, after convention, they made a decision that the issue that they would focus on would be racial justice. And as part of that, we were looking for a new chair for that commission, and they set a mandate, and we were able to fulfill it, to seek out a lay leader. Each commission is chaired by a rabbi and a lay person, a lay leader who was a Jew of color, who would step into that leadership role, and the chairs sit on our board. So we were able to tap a national leader, Shahana McKinney Baldwin, who's a member of our congregation in Madison, Wisconsin, who serves as the chair, the lay chair of the Tikkun Olam Commission, and she's been guiding that commission. There are many members of in this larger community. I have notes. There are many people from your two congregations that are very active. Jamie Epstein and Marilyn Kresge-Wolf and Jackie Glass all were elected to serve, and Lazora Jordan, who used to belong to Adat Shalom, were all elected to serve on the Tikkun Olam Commission. And they've been working very hard on racial justice. And with Shahana, we had our first board member of color. That was something we were working on. It was the beginning, not the end. So that was an existing newish governance structure, and we also created a new advisory group. I've been thinking about advisory groups for a good long while to try to get a concentration of focus on areas that we need to attend to. And I'd been thinking about two. One, John and I had many conversations about creating an advisory group about including people with disabilities. And the other was about something for Jews of color. And with these commitments, we created the Jews of Color and Allies Advisory Group. And we asked the chair of that group to sit on our board. So Jamie represents the Tikkun Olam Commission on that group, and also Minna Sherlinder Daub from Adat Shalom sits on that group. This group was already being convened as George Floyd was murdered. We had already asked this group to start to work on helping us focus in on our commitments. The Tikkun Olam Commission is mostly kind of movement and congregationally oriented, and we wanted this advisory group to help the board and the staff think about all the different levels of the organization. When George Floyd was killed, and there were many calls about how Jewish organizations could hold themselves more accountable, we asked the Jews of Color and Allies Advisory Group, this newly formed group, to generate commitments across the movement and across the organization, for the rabbinical school, for the board, for staff, for congregations, for our externally facing websites like Evolve and Ritual Well. They did an amazing job and generated these extraordinary commitments in the space of a year, so that at our June board meeting this year, immediately before Juneteenth, just a year after George Floyd died, the board overwhelmingly adopted these commitments, and the advisory group will help the board both generate metrics and hold us accountable. It'll take years. These are not once and done. These are not overnight things, but these are commitments that we will bring to life through a combination of staff and volunteer effort. So some of this is process-oriented, like recruiting new board members and creating governance structures, and some of it is really programming-oriented. I spoke to you about the role that Reconstructing Judaism plays about network weaving and bringing congregations together. We also play the role of generating resources and sharing them with you. A lot of them are crowd-sourced and then curated. So through our website, Ritual Well, For example, in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing, many, many rituals and prayers and poems were written to try to offer up solace and energize people who were out in the streets at the protests. And Ritual Well compiled all of those together and did some programming and offered them up. And I want to call your attention especially to Evolve, Groundbreaking Jewish Conversations, which is our website that promotes really substantive conversation, deeply respectful across difference. And it was founded in about 2018, and it was established there's several sections, and one of the very first sections was a section on race and racism. And in last summer, that section had a tremendous amount of traffic, and we heard from a lot of people within the Reconstructionist movement and beyond that some of the framing resources that we offered there were really helpful. So I promised you I'm starting to wind down, but what happened, all of this comes together, is that we understood that there's more. I could talk about more programming. This was happening here and here and here and here. And what we came to understand that this was coalescing as a priority, and that we needed, therefore, to make a strategic shift. And we were not planning on doing a strategic planning process last year, and the pandemic really pushed us to do that. So many changes, so much uncertainty. We wanted to act with the greatest possible clarity and with the greatest likelihood of effectiveness and impact. In general, if we had to shrink, if we were going to take on new directions. I'm so grateful to George Stone for his participation in the strategic planning process. He represented not only Oseh Shalom, but also we asked him to kind of channel the congregational voice. I want to talk about the racial justice priority, but before I do so, I just kind of want to zoom out first. We generated a new vision statement and a new mission statement for reconstructing Judaism in this process. And I want to share it with you right now, that the vision is of a diverse, connected, and engaged Judaism that meaningfully contributes to a just and compassionate world. And we fulfill that vision through our mission, which means we harness all the resources of the 501c3, known as Reconstructing Judaism, so that Reconstructing Judaism cultivates, provokes, and inspires a deeply rooted, boldly relevant, and co-created Judaism that provides individuals and communities with tools to live lives of meaning and joy. In the strategic plan, there's an absolutely gorgeous theory of change where we break down kind of visually how we propose to move from that vision to that mission, and it kind of filters through all those nouns and adjectives that I use there. That was one of the first things we did, was to articulate that vision and that mission, and then we were starting to talk about goals and strategies, and we were talking a lot about racial justice. We were talking about a lot of things. We were talking a lot about disability, we were talking some about Israel, we were talking about racial justice, and at a certain point, in part due to all of these influences that I was talking about, we made this ultimate decision not to just make certain that this commitment to racial justice was infused across the organization, but that it would be crystallized in a goal. We only have 5 goals, so that was a big deal to kind of raise it up. Once it was articulated, it was really mostly clear to us. The only reason it wasn't clear was, and this is some of the tension, it was because social justice, tikkun olam, is a very high priority across the Reconstructionist movement. And while we feel that we know that there's a very high level of interest and support in this goal, we also know that there are other people who are very passionately working on other priorities, often with an intersectional sensibility, like with the racial equity lens as well. But there are folks who work on climate change, there are folks who work on food justice, there are folks who are really committed to abortion rights, all of which are really, really, really essential at this moment. And we were really worried that, like, what does it mean to center one, and might it, especially in a smaller movement that is frankly under-resourced, we do an awful lot with very little money. What would it mean to raise this one up, and what were the costs? we especially were really struggling with disability justice. This was not something that was new for us, and the pandemic has really brought the essential importance of including people with disabilities to the forefront. So I'm going to just read for 1 second the language that we used in the strategic plan. The goal that we adopted was join and lead Jewish efforts to dismantle systemic racism and to advance racial diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Reconstructionist movement. We talked about how we would listen to the voices of especially Jews of color through the advisory group and through the Tikkun Olam Commission. I mean, they are multiracial groups, but there are Jews of color in leadership. And what we said is we commit to diversifying our movement at all levels, to enacting powerful and transformative allyship, and to leveraging our power and the richness of our traditions to lead the fight for racial justice in partnership with other values-aligned organizations. The transformational work we think we know we have to do with others. There's so much we can do within the Reconstructionist movement. This is the sentence that was really, felt really essential, and that's why I'm raising it up. We acknowledge the intersectionality of different axes of exclusion, and we recognize the continued need to sustain our historic commitments and to seize opportunities to support and institutionalize a culture of inclusion across our movement, particularly with regard to disability inclusion. But we concluded, given the urgency of the moment, this plan maintains a dedicated focus on race. So we mean that so much, and we're working very, very hard to work on many, many, many fronts, and also to really prioritize race. So the strategies, and I'm not going to go into the tactics, but the strategies that we embedded in the strategic plan were strive to become an anti-racist organization. It's always an ongoing work. We're not going to get there, we know it, but to continuously strive to engage and support our congregations and communities in the work of transformational change. And we are piloting a congregational assessment, and we are so grateful to Oseh Shalom for being one of the communities participating in that pilot. Our strategy to elevate the voices and experiences of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in our texts and in our tradition, and to advance our anti-racist agenda in the public square. Staffing is essential to getting anything done. One of the reasons we haven't founded the other advisory group is because it hasn't been clear. We don't have the adequate resources to ensure that there's a staff person. We got very, very lucky that Rabbi Sandra Lawson, who I mentioned at the beginning, was able to join our staff last spring. The Jews of Color Initiative provided funding to develop the field, and Sandra, who was working as a Hillel director in North Carolina, came and said, I'd like to apply for this grant and do this work for the Reconstructionist movement. We said, go to it, we'd love to have you. We got the grant funding, we hired her on soft money last year, and we institutionalized the position into our budget this year. This is not work that should only be dependent on grant funding. So, and Sandra does, she's doing all kinds of public representation and also the kind of consultation with the congregation. So I'm going to wind it down. I just want to raise up the Tikkun Olam Commission really quickly and talk about how, again, their singular focus is on racial justice. They're doing all kinds of things. There's a resolution group, there's a group supporting congregations. They are putting out educational materials, including the distribution of that reparations curriculum. They have a subgroup, a committee, working on movement trips with a racial justice focus. In 2022, we are planning 2 movement trips to Montgomery, Alabama, to the Equal Justice Initiative's Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. You might know this as it's the lynching monument. The first trip is going to happen in May, and it is a small trip for Jews of African descent who are in formal positions of leadership in the Reconstructionist movement. They're going to go together to Montgomery for a community building experience for themselves and to counsel us on how to later in the year do a movement-wide trip. Because in November, Veterans Day of November 22, November 10th to 13, we are going to open up a trip to congregations and individuals affiliated with the Reconstructionist movement to travel together to the lynching monument as Reconstructionists to make this pilgrimage, I would say, to make this sacred pilgrimage. And we think that we can accommodate about 200 people, and frankly, I think it's going to be oversubscribed. So there's so much more that I could talk about, and again, I'm going to stop. I want to just, what I cut when I realized how long this was going was the why. I've talked about the how, and I've talked about the who, and I've talked a little bit about the what. I hope the why is manifest to all of you. There's always more reasons why. If my articulation of that, I published an op-ed in E-Jewish Philanthropy in February that spells out my whys, and I'm happy to share that link with you. But where I want to end is just with a story and then a plug for convention, because you can learn about all of this and more, and you can experience this together at our convention in Tyson's Corner, not far, March 23rd to 27th of this coming year. Really fantastic health safety team who's counseling us to make certain that we are all safe. But what I want to end with is a story. I talked about how we're trying to do this transformationally, and it's not just about program, it's also about policies, it's also about practices. One of the things we did right before the pandemic was we had a staff-wide training on basically how for supervisors, it was everybody came, and one day was only for supervisors about how to be good supervisors, and the second day was everyone, and it was about management in general, including helping folks who aren't supervised manage up. It's really good. We hired the Management Center, which is a DC-based operations, and who are very, very well regarded, and they do everything with a racial equity lens. And so one of the things that they did for the supervisors was to talk about when we are hiring, how to go about finding new people in a way that really broadens and deepens the pool of candidates. That what happens too often is that we just go to the places we know, the places we came from, and we end up hiring people who look exactly like us. And if we're really committed to diversifying our organization, there are all kinds of different practices that we have to put in place. So I found it was great. It was really interesting, and I had the first opportunity to put it into practice last spring as we were hiring a new vice president for academic affairs who is responsible for the rabbinical program. I'm the president. I have the great honor at graduation of laying hands on the graduates and making them rabbis, but it is the vice president for academic affairs who handles the day-to-day administration and leadership of the rabbinical program, who guides the faculty and who's in relationship with the students. So I use these new principles, I use these new practices in this search. I didn't just only reach out to our rabbis, who are overwhelmingly white. We have a handful of rabbis of color, but this is a process that's just starting. I have new networks and new relationships that I didn't have when I ran this search 8 years ago. Sandra was on our staff, and she was and she was an incredible network opener. I found we had a very different, very interesting, very qualified pool. And the end result, last May, June, we announced, and she began in July, that our new vice president for academic affairs is Dr. Amanda Mbuvi, who is a Black Jewish woman who came to us from High Point University. She is overwhelmingly qualified, and she is already making an incredible impact. And it is entirely clear to me that there is no way that I would have found her, or that she would have either known about us or felt the call or the confidence that we would be receptive to apply if we hadn't really been pursuing this in a different way. This was not an affirmative action hire, and this was not all about symbolism. Amanda is extraordinarily qualified and is really contributing in really significant ways. It feels a little bit like, for me, when I rose up to leadership in 2014 as a woman, and then I was the first woman. There are others who join me in National Jewish Leadership now. I still remain one of the only, if not the only, queer person in my role. And like for me and with her, this is expressive of our Reconstructionist commitments. That we want, that the world that we want to live in is, the community that we want to build is a community that allows each and every person to offer up their gifts, to shape the community, and with the understanding that we, the community, will be enriched and transformed by that. That's the purpose, that's the why, I think, more than anything, of this work. It is, I hope I've demonstrated, highly collaborative, not always easy, always worthwhile, and deeply holy. And I want to thank you for all the ways that you have already participated and invite you to partner with us to keep walking this path, keep journeying on this sacred journey. Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom.